Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Stankus, and I'm running for Pennsylvania State Senate in the 42nd District. If you're in the 42nd District, that's wards 19, 20, 28, and 32 in this room, and I haven't talked to you, please come up and talk to me. Even if you're wearing a Wayne sticker, my feelings won't be hurt. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what more the state legislature could be doing, because that's exactly why I'm running. I think there's a lot more that our state legislature could be doing to help our communities here at home. So let me just go through a few of my priorities for my campaign. As your state senator, I will prioritize public education. Every year, our state leaders vote to give hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to private and religious schools, while claiming that they simply don't have the money to fund our public schools. Since learning in 2023 that the majority of these private schools that receive public funding discriminate against students based on disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, our state leaders have doubled that funding to over $650 million annually. And yet the Pittsburgh public schools here in Pittsburgh are forced to grapple with closing a dozen buildings, laying off hundreds of staff, and still raising the millage rate on hardworking homeowners already struggling to make ends meet. As your state senator, I will prioritize affordable housing. Our state leaders' failure to respond to the affordable housing crisis is pushing people out of the neighborhoods that they grew up in. For example, 15 years ago, the state passed legislation that enabled the creation of land banks, but failed to pass legislation that enabled any consistent source of funding for those land banks. As a result, the Pittsburgh Land Bank, established in 2014, languished for a full decade before acquiring even a single property. Importantly, the funding for land banks doesn't have to come from the state. The state must merely enable the land banks to get its own source of funding. Across the border in Ohio, in the same decade that our land bank acquired 0 properties with 0 funding, Cleveland's land bank acquired 10,000 properties and provided an economic benefit of over $1.4 billion with a B by leveraging the interest and fees from delinquent property tax payments, a funding source that cost the state 0 pennies and didn't even infringe on the tax base of the city, county, or school district. Our state is also not doing enough to protect us from the skyrocketing electric bills that we all have to pay every single month. These costs are due in large part to the rising specter of data centers. A few years ago, our state leaders passed legislation to provide hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer handouts every year to the corporations that own and operate data centers. At the same time, they claim they can't pass any legislation to protect us from those very same data centers. As a result, the costs of the infrastructure upgrades necessitated by these centers and their outrageous demand for electricity is passed directly to the electric bills that you and I pay, to the tune of billions, again with a B, dollars every single year. As your state senator, I would prioritize strengthening our region's workforce, including by extending prevailing wage laws to all forms of government spending, including tax subsidies, and strengthening collective bargaining rights, for example, by prohibiting corporations from stripping healthcare benefits during a work stoppage. Our state leaders once again blame the divided government on inaction on issues important to our working class, although that divided government doesn't seem to stop them when it benefits corporate interests, like those of the data center companies, or the private utility companies, or the corporations that administer the private school tax credits I just mentioned, or the handful of out-of-state mega corporations that are buying up housing across our community. And lastly, I know the focus of a lot of people in here isn't necessarily the gridlock in Harrisburg, but it's the campaign of violence and terror that's being waged against our communities and our immigrant neighbors by the Trump administration. And unfortunately, instead of protecting our communities, our state is lending support and resources to that campaign of terror. Our state police are proactively reaching out to ICE when they learn about somebody's immigration status, including witnesses and victims of crime who come forward to speak with the police. Our state prisons are detaining people on behalf of ICE, and our state agencies are providing unfettered access to multiple state databases that include information about every Pennsylvanian. Our state leaders could snap their fingers tomorrow and end this cooperation. So if the job of an elected official is truly to leverage relationships, then we need to demand that our current elected officials leverage those relationships to protect our communities because they are suffering and bleeding, and silence is complicity. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.